committed to do the balance.
Okay, this is not loading.
You got that figured out yet?
Seriously, no. So it doesn't go this way.
Yep, that should work. It won't stay up.
Steven to load mine.
Good evening. Welcome to the July 12, 2022 Township Board regular meeting for the Charter Township of Meridian. Welcome. If you will, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Lemaster, we have a roll call.
Supervisor Jackson.
Here.
Clerk Guthrie.
Here.
Treasurer DeShane. Here. Trustee Hendrickson. Trustee Sundlin.
Here.
Trustee Wazinski.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Hendrickson is absent. All others present.
Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda tonight is presentations. We have 3. The first will be made by Chief Plaga, and I will warn you that he has good news and positive things to say about a 24-year-old partner. I mean, I'm sorry, 24-year partner.
I'll take that compliment.
I know what you mean. A 24-year partner at Meridian Township.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor, board members. Today with me I have the 2022 Officer of the Year, Christina Scacia. Officer Scacia has been with the department for 24 years. I believe that is effective tomorrow, the 13th. So
Yes.
lucky number 13. Officer Scacia's, so what I'd like to share first is how do you become Officer of the Year? It's not somebody that I just pick and say this is the Officer of the Year. What it is they're nominated by a group of their peers. Anybody that works for the police department can nominate one of their coworkers to be Officer of the Year or Employee of the Year. That then goes to a board of peers that then review the qualifications that meet the standards for Officer of the Year, the excellence, the going above and beyond. When Chrissy, then they bring it to me, and I do have the right to veto, but I've never vetoed a name because there's so many great people that they brought forward, but no one quite as special as Chrissy Scacia. 24 years here, there's only one person at the police department longer, and he's standing here talking to you. So Chrissy and I have worked together for, like you said, 24 years. She does No Senior Without a Christmas. She does Shop with a Cop. She's been a school and community resource officer where she's taught the DARE curriculum and other classes to our 5th grade and high school students. She's takes phone calls on her days off and at nights from faculty and staff when there's concerns about school members. She did a stint in our investigations, investigated homicides and other serious crimes. I'm so proud to be here to represent Chrissy as Officer of the Year because she is really the best that Meridian has to offer. Chrissy?
Well, thank you. They didn't even make me talk at the award ceremony with my peers, so I'm a little uncomfortable. But it is extremely an honor to be nominated by my peers that I work with, and I'm probably going to choke up here. But being here 24 years, I love working for this community. I loved the school resource unit when I was in it. I'm glad somebody else has an opportunity to do it because it really does open your eyes, and it's just it's priceless to be in there with the schools and the kids. And so I'm love working with Ken, Chief Plaga, and everyone that I work with. You have a phenomenal police department. You have phenomenal officers. I'm proud to go on any call with any one of them, and I would hope that you as residents would feel the same way. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chief Scatia, and congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Half my age and I'm a chief. Thank you. And I'm only 24. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation will be from Mr. Walsh, Manager Walsh, who's going to talk about his semi-annual report.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson and board and community members. So tonight I'll be doing a brief presentation on the first 6 months of Meridian Township and what we've accomplished and what we have left to do. So we'll get right into it. These were the goals that the board set out back in November, December of 21 for this year, and infrastructure and diversity, equity, inclusion, and planning, and public safety, and finances, and community engagement, and we'll get into each of those rather quickly tonight. So the first goal was the big project of the year, and that's the Okamus Road Bridge project. Lots happened in the last week with the platform being brought in, the road being closed totally, 100% closure for the I think it was a 40-foot expansion to be brought in, and Trustee Wilson actually posted a neat picture of that from one of our Rotarians. But the project's moving along. We're hoping that the county and their contractors, it's not our project, will have the project finished by Thanksgiving. That's the plan right now. Community's been very patient with this project. Goal number 2 is our DEI, our efforts with the diversity, equity, inclusion. Here is the event that Director Clark had at the Celebration Cinema maybe just about a month ago now. And of course, Judge Wanda Stokes on the left, they are presenting to our entire team on June 20th at our event that we had at the marketplace. If you didn't have the opportunity to hear Judge Stokes, and if you ever do get a chance to hear Judge Stokes, you should really embark yourself to do that. She's a wonderful ambassador, not only for the Circuit Court, but for Meridian Township as a resident. Goal number 3 is interesting that we're here tonight because this is a goal that's been on the agenda for this township for all of my 10 years here, and I think many years before that, and that is to redevelop the Haslet Village Square. And great to see the groundbreaking occur this week. There's a lot more things planned up there, which we'll get into. I won't belabor the point right now because you're going to get into that in a little bit this evening. Mm-hmm. Goal number 4 has some different components to it. One is updating the township master plan. That will occur starting in the fall. There's money, I think it's $40,000 that's budgeted in the 2022 budget to help fund the master plan. Number 2 is the development of the Parks and Rec master plan. That has occurred. That's been approved by the Parks Commission and the Township Board, and that occurred in, I believe, March, which was right at about the time the board had a shift and a couple of new members, if you recall that. And the final one, the procedure for public art installations, and we're still working to get off of home plate on that project. Goal number 5 is the solar project, and this is year number 4 of the solar project, and it involves the carports at the police station, and we are ready to roll with that, and we believe that it will happen in the first part of September. The bids are in. The bids are under what Manager Opsimer put out there. I believe it's under $100,000, and that again will be year number 4. Also, there's some other things we're doing in this area of energy conservation, and that is the Wetland Campaign, which of course Trustee Wazinski is very knowledgeable of, serving on the Environmental Commission. I think it's the Build Back the Buffer program, and there's other ones, but that's one of the programs that just came out of the Environmental Commission and we're going forward with. They've done great work here, the Green Team, the Environmental Commission, and all combined. And the recycling events, of course, continue, and there's a photo of that on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is the brochure that was created to make our community more knowledgeable of wetlands. Goal number 6 has a number of components. It involves infrastructure, the IT infrastructure. Again, I won't go into that this evening. You all know we have a lot of work to do to improve our infrastructure here within our facilities, not just in this building, but throughout the township. Now, we've set aside a significant amount of funds from ARP funding to complete that. Brightline from Brighton, Michigan is the consultant to make that happen. Phase 1 and 2, MSU to Lake Lansing. In fact, Supervisor Jackson and I were together yesterday going to tour the new Michigan State sexual assault recovery facility. Again, if you aren't aware of what's going on at MSU with that facility, again, something to really check out. It's really state of the art. They're doing great stuff at the university with that. But on that way, we were talking about the Lake Lansing project. We have the tree removal completed for phase 1. The most important component of all this is the funding, which is $3.15, $3.2 million. Only $300,000 of that will come from the township. 1.7 of that's a federal grant. And the remaining funds, several hundred thousand, will come as a reimbursement from the county for the parks millage that was approved several years ago. So out of the, about 10% of that project's being funded by Meridian Township. You'll start to see work happen this fall. And we're also working on getting the easements for phase 3 already. And again, that's from all the way from Hagedorn all the way over to Lake Lansing. Major connection. Expanding the parking lots, we're not going in Meridian Park and Central Park. Due to cost and staying within the budget, we'll probably only see, we're getting ready to bid that out through our engineering department, but because of what we're seeing in the bidding world out there, we may only be able to do one of those this year, unless we come back and request additional funds, and that would of course come from the board. The house on Okamus Road and preparation of the trail, which was in front of the service center on Okamus Road, has been purchased. It has been demolished. And water quality at Central Park, that's a really interesting project. With some water fountains installed, and as best I can understand it, some plantings put in there, and the plantings were actually planted native species by our team, and as they germinated and grew, we planted them in with the Central Park Fountain Project. It's really a neat thing, and Emma Campbell and her team and others are responsible for that. Making great progress. The only thing I'd point out is we may not get to both of the parking lots. Goal number 7, recruiting for police and fire and accreditation. In October, we'll have a mock introduction to our police accreditation. And then in December, we'll go through the full reaccreditations with the Michigan Association of Police Chiefs. We were again, I believe, the 24th community in Michigan just 3 years ago to receive this accreditation. So it goes to the comments you heard from Officer of the Year, Scatia. And then, of course, the bold recruiting. Everyone knows it's difficult to recruit police and fire paramedics right now, and our recruiting has taken us all the way to Los Angeles. I think it's Danny Gray. I think it's Danny. Thank you, Danny Moore, who's just a tremendous addition. He is going to be going through the academy, and excited to have him on board. But we reached out to him in Los Angeles. The funding for MERS and the ART funding. We're going to talk a little bit about more of that in the MERS presentation coming up, so I won't go into that this evening. But we made a promise back in 2017 when the voters approved a 1.483 millage, right, which generates approximately $2.8 million per year. And we said we were going to do several things. We were going to hire police officers, which we're still attempting to do. We have budgeted 41 every year. We're trying to get there. We said we were going to increase fire paramedics from 30 to 32. Not only did we do that, we went from 30 to 34. So we've surpassed that goal. And then we've also said we're going to put an additional $1.5 million into the pension fund. We've been putting in between 1.7 and 1.9 million per year. We've surpassed that promise. And then finally, we said we're going to set $250,000 aside in 18, 19, 20, and 21 to have $1 million to purchase a ladder truck. We've done that. The ladder truck's been ordered. It's about $960,000. So we've met all of our commitments and surpassed them with the promises that we made in 2017. And finally, the art funding, as you know, half of that has been appropriated, not dispersed by the board for IT and for additional local road work. I just was informed today, and by the way, Amanda Garber, big significant day today. It's day one of permanent full-time. She's no longer sharing with the city of Chelsea. So we welcome Amanda Garber, our CPA finance director here, and she informed me today that we have received the additional $2.265 million in art funding, and that's the next decision for the board to make when it comes to where you plan to allocate that. And goal number 9, the website has been refreshed. Well, of course, we're having a change in staffing at the communications department, so we'll have to transfer the duties there. This project is underway, the enhancing of the town hall room, and the communication plan for the community services millage is underway. We did go through a discussion, a decision tree on whether to seek an increase in that millage. It involves not only the senior center, but it involves recreation, and it involves our Meridian Cares Fund. And through some collaboration and discussion, decided not where we were not going to seek an increase, and we were not going to seek a Headley override. We're actually going to take the reduced millage in that discussion. So we've been through that, and so that millage that's up before the voters is less than what it was when it was originally approved. And goal number 10, retention and recruitment. I think we're doing fairly well, pretty well in this area. A lot of neat, lug nuts game, a summer picnic, a retention payment program, flex time. I could go on and on. HSAs paid up front at one time. We've been doing a lot to retain, and it's working. It's working. We've had 3 or 4 changes in employment here in the last few weeks. Unfortunately, we got news just in the last few days. We're losing a long-term employee, and Jay Graham's retiring upstairs in the engineering department. He's been here almost 34 years. So, but he's going to retire here at the end of August. No, that'll be big shoes to fill for us. But our program to retain and recruit is working, and we'll keep at it. We have approximately, taking away the police department, we only have about 3 or 4 openings township-wide. So I'd say what we're doing is working. And that's kind of an update for you. That's a half a year in about 15 minutes. But that's how we're going about the goals. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Do you have questions on this issue at this time? Then I believe Mr. Walsh is going to take care of item 4C as well. Municipal Employees Retirement System. Yeah, exactly. This is a very important component of our entire township, and certainly the promises that have been made to certainly the police and firefighter paramedics for their future, and also the future of the finances of the township. So if you go back to the budget letter in August of 2013, I had been here 4 months and was going through the budget process, brand new, and I noticed an escalating problem that was coming, and it was the pension. And this is a quote right from the budget letter that was written in August of 2013, that we needed to do something with our pension funding, not only for now, but for years to come. So we have received our actual report, which you have a copy of in front of you. And going along, you can, if you would like, you can flip along here with the pages, but this is page 6 of the report that you have in front of you. This is the great news. This is really important news, because there are over 40% of the communities in Michigan who are under 60% funded in their pensions. Over 40% are less than 60% funded. And we were teetering there just back 8 or 9 years ago. And we'll get into those numbers in a minute. But we just received our actual report, and this is the pension fund that covers predominantly police and fire. Police and fire make up approximately 75% of this pension. Our funding ratio is at an all-time high. It's now hit 72%. And that may not sound like a great number, but if you look at a number of communities in Michigan, they would be very happy with 72%. This is the
funding position. And if you go back, as you can see, in 1999, we were 54% funded. But even as of just 4 years ago, we were 64% funded. We've never been in the 70s before. Again, it's a reason to stop and pause and celebrate that we're moving forward, but it's also we've got work to do as well. So this gets into this is an interesting slide, and I know the numbers are hard to read, and that's why you have the report in front of you. But if you go to page 7 of the actuarial report, this is an important slide because if you remember what I've been telling you for the last few years, that if we started to do things right and we allocated the right amount of funds, our payments would start to go down because they've gone up every year. It's finally happened. Our payment to MERS, and this would be a monthly contribution, is actually forecasted to go down. And this is paying the higher amount. If you look closely at this, you could pay the phased-in amount, which is the fourth column over from the end. You could pay $243,000 if you wanted. Now, remember what we said. We said that we are going to, for those that were here in 2017, we said to the public, we're going to put these extra funds in, but we're not going to let it dilute what we're putting in. Because as you pay more in, your ARC, your actual required contribution, goes what? Down. As you pay more in than you're supposed to, the ARC goes down. So we could start paying a much reduced rate. But we're not doing that. We're keeping the promise that we made, and we're paying the higher amount. So this shows that the efforts that we made for the first time in my 10 years here, in I would guess the history of this community, our pension payments actually going down even when we pay the higher non-phased-in amount. This is page 8 of the report, and it says if you want to reach 100% funding in 10 years, and again, these are not Meridian Township numbers, these are not Frank Walsh numbers, these are not Chief Plaga numbers, these are actuarial numbers from Gabriel Roeder. And what they say is if you want to pay it off in 10 years, you shouldn't pay the $261 or the $240 that they offer. You need to pay $367 a month for a total of $4.4 million. We aren't just paying the $4.4 million. That's the number to pay it off in 100 years, or in 10 years. What I'm showing you here is we're actually going to allocate in the next budget coming up $5.3 million. So we're saying, what does it cost to pay it off in 10 years? Well, let's add $1 million to that. That's what we're allocating for next year. And that's the language right out of the report. Here's another important point. MERS is in a difficult relationship with a lot of communities in the state because they've been using what many consider a ballooned rate of return. It was 8%. And now they've lowered it down to 7.75, 7.35. Now MERS has lowered it to 7. So it's gone down one percentage point. So for all those communities that were looking at what they were going to have to pay off in MERS over time, they were looking at these rosy 8% rate of returns. Well, now that the rate of return has dropped, it isn't so rosy. And so their payments are escalating out of control. And what happens when you look at a rosy picture, you give out more benefits than you should, or that you can afford. This model shows something that Meridian's doing that hardly anyone's doing in the state. We're saying we were using a 5.35 rate of return. We're going down to a 5% rate of return. We are 2 percentage points below what MERS is using for a rate of return. And you can see what that does to your payment. If you go with a 7% payment or rate of return, your payment is only $261 a month. If you go with a 5%, it's $444,000. $444,000. That's $180,000 a month increase. Remember the number I just showed you, the $5.3 million that we're putting in, $900,000 more than we need to? Mm-hmm. That's the number right there. 444, that's what the actuarial says, times 12, that's our payment. We are paying the 5% anticipated rate of return. And this just shows you the description of that. MERS required 7%, $261 a month. We only need to pay $3.1 million. That's all we need to pay. We're paying the 5%, which is the 444 I just showed you, $5.3 million. And to get to 100%, $4.4 million. So again, we're $900,000 higher than what they're saying you need to pay to get to 100%. What's the difference? We're going to be paying an additional $2.2 million. If you look at what's required, $3.1 million, we're paying $5.3. We're paying $2.2 million more than what's required. And we told the voters we would pay $1.5 million. We're paying $700,000 more next year than what we promised the voters we would be paying. And this just gets into real quickly. This is the value versus liabilities for each one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Public Works is funded at 80%. The police patrol, 79%. Firefighters, that's where the struggle comes in. They're hugely underfunded. What's really interesting is the firefighters' pension with only 32 or 34 employees is much higher than 41 police officers. The firefighters' pension is much more expensive. And as you can see, we're only 51% funded on the firefighter side. But it's the first time the firefighters have been over 50% in the history of their fund. Administrative professionals, 81% funded. The Teamsters, which is no longer a union here because there was only 2 of them and they're no longer a union, but they're at 86% funded. Police Command is at 56% funded. Here's the other question. The modifications that we made in benefit structure back in 2017 where we negotiated down pensions, the question is that working? Is it any different than what we had before? Well, here's the answer from the actuarial. The firefighters hired after January 1 of 17, which have a modified hybrid pension, which I won't go into all the details tonight, but we've been really reeling them in with it. I mean, we are staying fully staffed in the fire department with this hybrid system. What's it funded? The firefighters' old pension is what? 51. What is the new one? 94% funded. It's working. And what about the Public Works? What about their pension after 1/1/17? They're at 94% funded. And then the next slide is the accrued liabilities, which is $28 million. And of course, that's been reduced down to $23 million, going from 64 to 67, 72. We've improved our funding position by $5 million. And here's a chart of our growth and where we hope to get to. Again, to get to 100%, we're extending that out to 2030, but we're making really good progress on getting there. A summary, good progress. We're at an all-time high. We have very generous pension benefits. If you retire from Meridian Township Police or Fire, you have really great benefits. You have a B4, which is the top of the line pension offered by MERS. You also have a COLA included with that. You have an outstanding pension. You give great service here, you get great benefits. The township's contributing $2.2 million more than is required, and we've extended our 100% funding until 2030. Last slide that I would go over, and this is our overall system. Now, I know most of you haven't followed Meridian Township's funding for liabilities, but this is an issue that is crippling, absolutely crippling communities. I believe there's a community within 20 miles of us that's $700 or $800 million underfunded. This is where we are. We were significantly underfunded 10 years ago with our retiree health care and our own township pension fund. The township pension fund, by the way, is closed out. There are no current employees here that are even covered under that. That's how old that plan is. The retiree health care is a point or two away from being 100% funded. The state average is 58. The township pension fund is over 100% funded. And now our MERS, which used to be in the 50s, is now 72% funded. We are making tremendous progress. We've wiped out millions of dollars of debt and our legacy cost. And I'll tell you, you want to see a town flourish? Wait till this community, and maybe some of us in the room won't be here to see it, but wait till this community pays down the MERS and gets close to 100%. What's going to happen with think about the things you could do in this community if you weren't saddled with this huge pension debt. And trust me, it was much more just 4 or 5 years ago. And that's why we have the funds now to do a lot of the things we're doing. But think about this community in just a few years when we're not having to pay huge pension liability. There'll be a lot of opportunities here for this community. That's a complete wrap-up of 6 months, and that's a complete wrap-up of where our pension funds are and our actual report for 2021. We probably won't talk about this again until the summer of 2022 because we are on a great trajectory. So that's the report. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Board members, questions, comments at this point? Treasurer DeShane.
Manager Walsh, thank you for this presentation. And you make a lot of presentations to this board, and I've noticed your passion for this one. This is a really important issue, and it's not easy to get excited about these kinds of numbers, but these are very important numbers. When some of us on this board joined this board in the November of 2016, we were looking at that 58% funded number, which was an embarrassing number. We were almost put on a watch list by the state for being so poorly funded. And the board recommended to the voters the police and fire millage of 2017 to 1.4 mils, and that started to move us in the right direction. And you've kept us to that. To making our basic contribution an additional $1.5 million or more as years have allowed for it. This comes at a great time because any of us who opened up our 401k statement in the past week for the first half of the year put it in the recycling bin as soon as we could and wonder if we're ever going to be able to retire. The market is down 20% this year, and it's not expected to bounce right back as it did 2 years ago. We could be in for some rough sledding in the market in the years ahead. Over the past few years, it's been exceptionally high. It was at 31% in 2019, 18% in 2020, 28% in 2021. So the markets really had been on a tear recently, but this is the correction that many people feared. And if these numbers weren't so good and having a down year as we do this year, we wouldn't be looking forward to next year's number. The good news for us is that MERS uses smoothing. Correct. So when we get our number for 2022, it won't just reflect the market. It'll reflect years of taken into that account. It will certainly be down a bit from past years, but it won't be down in a way that the market exactly mimics the market. So that's good news for us. And we were in what you call a downward spiral. The numbers kept getting worse. Our benefits liability increased, and so it required a larger and larger contribution. You've helped us to get into a virtuous cycle. So as we're getting ahead on our annual payment, more and more, and our additional contribution, our annual payment has now finally reached that point where it's going down. And we need to stay on that course. And you're exactly right. Once we solve this problem and we're fully funded by 2030, or according to the page even 2038, we will still be in a unique position to have this very large liability paid off, and probably be one of the few communities in the state that's done that. This board has assigned me to the CATA board. CATA is looking at their employee health care funding at 48% right now. And they're not unique, and a lot of public entities have huge liability either on the employee health care or on pension or both. And it's very good news that our employee health care is nearly 100% funded, and we're at 72%. And you're exactly right. This is really good news for the township, and it's taken the discipline of the board and the staff to get there. And even in this tough year in the market, I think we're going to look at this number next year and know that we're making progress. So thank you for your passion for this and bringing it to us and making sure this board stays on top of probably the most important policy decision we make every year, which is how much to set aside to pay down this pension liability. And it gets back to the issue of attracting good employees. We want the best employees. We have the best employees. You only do that by offering an attractive benefits package. That comes at a cost. And it's up to this board to make sure that cost is paid, not just for today in terms of salaries, but into the future with the very generous retirement pension benefits and healthcare benefits that we offer our police and fire and other municipal employees. So thank you for this.
Thank you. If I may,
Yes, Mr. Wall.
So the treasurer raises a very important point, and that is, if you give all this report out, people are going to say, "Oh, the market's down significantly this year. Next year's going to wipe all that out." And smoothing is a very difficult thing to understand for a lot of people. It took me 9 or 10 years working on this to understand it. But smoothing is when, let's say we had a 28% growth in the market last year, and you think, well, that's reflected in this year, and it's not. What happens is you have a 5-year smoothing, so they take that 28% and they break it up over 5 years. So we've had 3 years of positive growth, maybe 33%. So that 30 to 33% over the last 3 years is divided up over the next. So even though next year's report will be tough, we'll have some positive experiences that we had in the former 3 years to smooth off some of those losses. And this year's losses are going to be significant, but they will also be smoothed over 5 years as well. So it's an important point, and thank you for raising that, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Well, thank you, Mr. Walsh, for the good news, and Mr. DeShane for helping us to interpret it. We move now to item 5, where citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. There are 2 opportunities for public comment. Citizens who wish to address the agenda or non-agenda items will have an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, as well as near the end of the meeting. Individuals who wish to address the board must complete a green form located with the agendas near the room entrance, and present the card to the board secretary prior to the start of the public comment period. At the appropriate time, supervisor will call upon individuals who have completed a green form to speak on the topics indicated. Citizens are required to limit their comments to 3 minutes, except when this requirement is waived in advance by the supervisor. A timekeeper will communicate to the individual who is addressing the board at the conclusion of the 3 minutes. The board highly values public comment and input. However, the board meeting format is designed to facilitate the evening's agenda, and therefore restricts board members from engaging in conversation with speakers or immediately responding to questions. Questions and concerns may be addressed by the board later in the agenda, or may be assigned for follow-up by the board or the township manager at a later date. In order to foster the orderly conduct of the board's business on behalf of the community, please refrain from rude or discourteous behavior. Address all comments to the board, not to individual board members or to others in attendance. Finally, the meeting is a meeting of the Board of the Township, held in public for the purpose of conducting the business of the township. It is not a meeting of the public. Please limit comments to the issues on the agenda to the greatest extent possible. At this point, I have 1 green card, and that is from John Covell. If you would come to the podium, Mr. Covell, and give us your name and address and deliver your comments.
John Covell, 6156 East Lake Drive, Haslet. It was real interesting that he brought up retirement, because that's not what I came here for. But I just wanted to comment, I worked at Myers for 49 years, all the way up to age 69, and I don't believe any township employee can match that any way, shape, or form. So, you know, and I don't get medical either, by the way. So, you know, I feel sad for somebody being underfunded, but when somebody tells me they worked 25 years and retired at 50, and then they complain about it, come on, I made it almost to 70 years old. Anyhow, the main reason I came here was the Lansing State Journal this morning. I knew that they were going to redevelop the old L&L Center, but I did not understand that the final outcome was going to be 422 units over a period of time. Those are just residential units to be rented out. That's going to cause a tremendous amount of traffic on that corner up there, a tremendous increase. And I've tried to cross that intersection on my bicycle. I don't care what time of day it is. I don't care which way I try to go. There is so much traffic there, and there's always a green light at you, across from you, a left turn. There is no downtime where I can get across. I have to make it quick. And I haven't, and well, I've had some confrontations, shall we say. I don't see 422 units as an increasement of quality of life out here. I think that's overcrowding. I realize that I'm probably too late on the boat on that one. Yeah, it's going to increase your tax base, yeah. But is it quality of life versus tax base? I would rather have the quality of life. This project has no financial incentive to me. It's not going to raise my property value. It's not going to lower my taxes or anything. It's just going to make Meridian Township and that intersection more crowded, more congested. I'm stunned at the 422 number. I can't grasp that. Sorry, guys. And as for, there's always an argument about jobs. Well, you know, construction jobs are temporary. Once the foundation is poured, then people are gone. Then the builder comes in, the carpenters come in, then they're gone. I mean, this is not General Motors coming to Meridian Township, building a big plant where we're going to employ 1,000 people for the next 20, 30 years. These are temporary jobs, and they're gone. And now we have 422 units plus the retail. So I got 5 seconds. I guess that's the end of it right there. But boy, I'd like to cut that thing in half. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to board agenda items or non-agenda items at this time? All right, we'll move on then to item 6, Township Manager's Report. Do you have more to say, Mr. Walsh?
I've said enough.
Okay, no comment. Item 7, Board Member Reports of Activities and Announcements. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. First thing I would like to remind our residents that the tax bills have been mailed out. If you haven't gotten a tax bill or a tax notice, please call our office tomorrow. The number is 853-4140. They were mailed out and received primarily on July 2nd. You either got a tax bill if you're paying your taxes directly, or you got a tax notice, which means you are an escrow payer that you're paying through your mortgage company. The easiest way to figure that out is if you got a return envelope, that means we're expecting you to mail it back. If you didn't get a return envelope, then your mortgage company will be paying that in. We'll be sending that in for you based on your monthly contribution to your escrow. We tried a new format this year. We moved away from the old press and seal to a full envelope and a full return envelope, as well as a notification of the new precincts for the clerk's office as well. So it's a new format, and so far they've been received very well. We're very glad about the response we're getting from our residents. The resident spoke about the State Journal this morning, and I was hoping he was going to mention something instead, which is a really wonderful story in the State Journal this morning on the Cole twins, our 2 new officers, identical twins that are police officers that are 24, that we met their grandfather, who was a retired Chelsea Police Department officer, and they've been sworn in, and it's a really wonderful feel-good story about our 2 new officers, written by Bryce Airgood, who covers the township and as well as East Lansing, and it's a really neat story. So if you can go online or pick up a copy on the way home, find that article on the Cole twins. They're a real asset to our township, and Lord knows we certainly need every officer we've got on the street right now, and they've really helping us to fulfill our public safety needs. So just wanted to bring up that article. Hopefully people have seen it and will read it. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Sundlin.
Yes. I just wanted to say that I attended the Meridian Transportation Commission meeting on June 16th, and Frank kind of included in some of his highlights of what's going on. There is going to be a left-hand turn lane going in on Haslet and Park Lake Road, which I think is very beneficial because there's a lot of accidents there. So they're working on that. And Hagedorn to Everett Road is going to have a road diet. So that's going to be extended, but I think Frank mentioned that already. So, but those are the highlights of the Transportation Commission meeting.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I just wanted to say what a wonderful event we had with Celebrate Meridian on June 25th. I know that Courtney, you were there, and Phil and Pat, and it was we had so much fun. I see Luann in the audience. It was a wonderful event. And next year, when we don't have the issue of having to close Central Park Drive, I bet it can be even better. So please take that opportunity once a year for us to celebrate our great community. And also, Supervisor Jackson and I had an opportunity to attend a town hall on cybersecurity for small towns, which was very informative and very terrifying. So we brought some information back to management and staff that we shared, and it just was a wonderful opportunity to be out there and hear these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I just want to let you know that in the clerk's office, we've received around 9,000 absentee ballot applications, and we sent out the first bulk mailing for absentee ballots to homes about 2 weeks ago. That was around 4,000 that we sent out, and then today we sent out another 4,500. After today, we will begin daily processing of those absentee ballot applications, where they will be sent out on a daily basis. So as we receive them, we will send them out. So if you haven't sent in your absentee ballot application, get it in so we can process it. We will do so immediately. If you have any questions, you can email the clerk's office at meridian.mi.us or give us a call. We're happy to help, or come in. We're happy to help you out with the process.
Thank you. Others? It just occurred to me that since our last meeting, we had a major emergency in the township, and there's no mention in our agenda of the water emergency. Can I get either Mr. Walsh or Mr. Opsimer to talk about that, and maybe even lessons we learned from that experience?
Yeah, it's really important. Also, I was sitting there, if you don't mind, Supervisor Jackson, one other point I wanted to make this evening. Voters are going to, and I was off of the clerk's comments, I'll let Manager Opsimer talk about our great response to the water main break. But you're going to the polls on August 2nd, and there's a referendum, a question on the ballot about recreational marijuana. And for many people, it's going to be confusing. And I just want to let everybody know that's out there, if you're going to vote on this issue, if you support recreational marijuana, you want to vote no. The way the ballot language is written, and it was provided, it's not the way we wrote it, it was the way the petition came to us. If you do not want to have marijuana shops in the community, you would vote yes. Just want to make sure people are aware that every chance I get, I'm going to remind people because it's confusing. Thank you.
Good evening, Supervisor Jackson and board members. Would you just like me to give kind of a brief recap of the events on that date? So I'm trying to recall the date in question. It was Thursday, June 23rd at 10:03 a.m. The Ingham County Road Department's contractor that was working at the intersection of Haslet and Park Lake Road, that is the project that Trustee Sunland was just speaking to. They are adding left-hand turn lanes, dedicated left-hand turn lanes on the east and westbound traffic on Haslet Road. So now you won't have to stack vehicles in the through lane, the inner through lane, right? And as they were working on the northwest corner, they did remove what we call a thrust block. It is essentially about 7 yards of concrete that is poured, and it's poured at the location of a 45-degree turn in our 24-inch water main. This is the largest water main that we have in our system. It's coming essentially directly from the Elmsville plant. That is why residents pretty much across the entire northern pressure zone, which is predominantly north of Kinawa and Bennett, with the exception of some residents that live in the Tower Gardens, Skyline Drive region in the west corner of the township because they are actually on East Lansing's city distribution system. However, they are township customers. But that's why such a large block of township residents experienced a pressure loss, is because of the proximity to the main relative to the plant. And so this water main, at first we thought it may have been a raw water main supplying water to the plant. But once we were able to isolate that main and close it off, which took about 24 minutes, that restored pressure to the system, and then we were able to actually get down and see what occurred. But the contractor removed that thrust block or the soil behind it, and so that pressure on a 24-inch main started to separate that 45-degree turn in the water main. So that is what resulted in the water main break. As I said, it was about 25 to 30 minutes before people had pressure. If you're on the outer rim of the system, it may have taken up to 45 to 50 minutes to restore pressure, at which point Elmswa, our manager, Clyde Dugan from Elmswa, came back here with his deputy, and we convened with our communications team in the township hall room to work on putting the map together to articulate to residents which pressure zone they are in and which pressure zone is in the boil water advisory. So who is under the water advisory and who is not. And then due to the 48-hour testing timelines, we were in the boil water advisory for about 55 hours due to the slight extension. We were able to get the first round of tests out that Thursday evening at 5:15 p.m. So pretty good timeline for Elmswood to get the actual first round of tests in the field, but we do have to wait 24 hours between testing. Precautionary measures that the township is taking as a result, the road actually on the southwest corner, so just on the south side of Haslet Road from where the water main break occurred, the Ingham County Road Department's contractor made cuts to the curb and the asphalt today, and that is because we are going to be hydro excavating, so we will be excavating with our Vector trucks with suction and water pressure to make sure that we expose the water main and any other underground utilities. There's also a high pressure consumer's gas main there. So we're going to make sure that we safely expose all those underground utilities so that we do not have any other issues there. We do have very low clearance, and that's one of the things that we saw. If you look at Manager Walsh posted a photo that I had sent him from the water main break that Thursday evening at about 8:30. There's only about 1 foot of soil between the bottom of the asphalt and the top of the raw water main and the 24-inch treated water main. So there's very little room for error there. So it wasn't set at the depth that we would typically do. Now that intersection's been widened over the years, so did the grade go down? Or, the grade may have come down over the years. That's certainly possible. It's hard to trace that back. But we are taking those precautions, and every resident, when they receive their water bill moving forward, there will be information on how they can subscribe to the township's emergency alert system moving forward. So we do use Everbridge. We used to use Nixle. Nixle is no longer available, but Everbridge is a national alert system. We partner with Ingham County, which has 3 different accounts, Lansing, East Lansing, Delhi, and some other communities in the region. And so there will be a link on the water bills moving forward so that we can increase our subscribership and make sure residents are able to get the alerts. And we encourage residents to subscribe at least to all 3 Ingham County alerts, as well as the Township Police Department and any others that may be relevant to them. If you have a second home, you may want to check and see if your community up north or wherever your second home is also uses Everbridge, and subscribe for those as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Does the board have questions? Mr. Deshane.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson, for bringing this issue up. It's been on, certainly that week and the week after, was on a lot of people's minds. During the 50 hours plus of testing, did you test for any contaminated water in the system during the advisory period?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a miscommunication internally, and then that got reported in the media that we were wishing for people to contact us if they had drank the water before realizing that there was a boil water advisory. That was an internal mistake where that information got put into the press release, and then The media altered it a little bit, and it was kind of like a game of phone, right? The more people you send the message through, the more it changes. So we really didn't want our residents to report to us. But to answer your question, Treasurer DeShane, in this instance, what we're checking for is groundwater that may have gotten into the water distribution system when we lose pressure. And so we're checking for bacteria that may have gotten into the system. We did 12 tests, 2 rounds of 12 tests. All tests were negative. We've also tested the broken section of water main, or the section of water main that was broken and has been fixed. It is still isolated as a precautionary measure while the road department finishes working in that area. And the tests on the isolated section of main were also negative. So there was no contamination of the system. Typically, you know, we're not testing for anything that is terribly harmful to human health. We're testing for bacteria that you would find in groundwater. It's not much different from food poisoning if you were to consume like raw or undercooked meat. So, but there is an abundance of caution built into state law. So with any time where we lose pressure in the system, there's always going to be a boil water advisory, and we will always go through the 2 rounds of testing.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? It's just one more question. The bottom, thank you for all of that information. It was a lot of information. But the bottom line is the best way to get information from the township in an emergency is?
Subscribing to Everbridge, and you can go to www.meridian.mi.us/get connected. And all of the various subscriber options are there, but Everbridge Emergency Alerts is at the very top of the webpage. It's a very simple form. You can subscribe in about 30 seconds, 1 minute. So very easy to subscribe. And that's the best way, whether it's a boil water advisory, whether it's severe weather, or traffic alerts. That's the most common thing that you would get is notices on avoiding, you know, Saginaw Highway and 127 in Frandor, or wherever the accident may be occurring that day. So it can be helpful day to day as well.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
Dan, will this extend the period of time in which that intersection is closed?
It will extend the duration in which traffic north of Haslet Road, so Park Lake north of Haslet Road, is closed. That will be closed permanently now. This was a 24-inch main, so we did have essentially a sinkhole created by the water main break. And at this point, you know, to bring the fill in and lay some asphalt, by the time they would do that, they would have already been at their juncture where they would have closed that anyway. However, though, if you are going to Costco, the curb cut on Park Lake, north of Haslet Road, is accessible. So if you're traveling on Saginaw Highway, you can take Park Lake and you can take it all the way down to the curb cut. The road is barricaded off there at the curb cut into Costco. And that project is slated to hopefully be done around mid-August if it stays on schedule.
Oh, good.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Opsner.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I guess finally, if members of the assembly tonight or the public have further questions about those issues, call Dan. We've come to item number 8, approval of our agenda. Mr. DeShane.
I move the agenda be approved as presented.
Support. Supported by Trustee Wazinski. Any comments? Concerns? Mr. All in favor of approval of the agenda as written, please say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Chair votes yes. And the motion passes. The next item is the consent agenda, which includes communications, minutes from the June 21 regular meeting, bills, and ratification of a new EMT firefighter appointment. Trustee Sunderland.
I propose that the consent agenda as written is approved.
Support.
Further comments? Mr. Master, we need a roll call vote?
Supervisor Jackson,
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin,
Yes.
Trustee Wilson,
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Item 10 on our agenda is questions for the attorney. We don't have one that we know of. So we move to item 11, which is a public hearing. 11A is a mixed-use plan unit development, number 22-014, related to 1621 and 1625 Haslet Road, Haslet Village Square. We will first hear from Mr. Schmidt.
I will be brief, as this is a public hearing. I can answer any questions, and the applicant is here this evening to answer any questions, but this is the public hearing proposal for the Haslet Village Square project. As we've reviewed this a couple of times, I'll just go over the highlights. Demolition of the main buildings on the site, with the exception of the building where the church is currently located. The Baptist church, that building will be preserved and renovated as part of the project. The remaining buildings will be removed. Over the course of the project, there will be 290 residential units and about 21,750 total square feet of commercial space, non-residential space, in 20 new buildings and one remaining building. This is the first project under the new MUPUD ordinance, and I will say the work that the Planning Commission and the Township Board put in on that has gone well. This plan was reviewed fairly effectively by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did vote to recommend it, and they are sort of meeting the intent of what we were looking for in terms of getting better and more varied amenities, highlighted by the construction and subsequent conveyance to the township of a trailhead at the corner of the property for the Lake Lansing to MSU Trail. So that'll be, as a runner, I can cut around the hill now instead of going up and down. So I appreciate that personally. But again, happy to answer any questions that the board might have, but this is the public hearing as required by ordinance. We have previously published it as requested. We did have a discussion on this at our last meeting, and we will bring this back for final action in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I need to open the public hearing at, we'll start it at 7:02, if that's appropriate. And I will ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak about the issue, or pro or con. If the developers would like to make any further comments about what Mr. Schmidt has provided? No? All right. If there are members of the public who'd like to speak on this issue, now is your time to do so. Seeing no comments, then we will close the public hearing at 7:03. And I think maybe we will come back to have questions from the board if Mr. Schmidt, if you have questions for Mr. Schmidt at another point. No questions? All right. You have a question?
Director Schmidt, this is regarding the waiver for parking. I read in the information that was provided to us, there's a pretty significant waiver for parking, because this is a new concept of all rental housing and market value, and the anticipation is that there will not be as many vehicles to park as there would be in another situation. Is that accurate?
Correct. I would also add that our ordinance is somewhat out of line with modern parking standards, and that is one of staff's goal, the CPD staff's goals for the year, is to update that, and we hope to have a draft in front of the Planning Commission in the upcoming months. We're actually talking about it tomorrow at 11 o'clock to work on that. But yes, they have data and other projects that indicate that they are even more parked than they would need to be given what they see in the market. and they are comfortable with it. They've also provided some additional information as to other areas where they could add parking if they needed to after the Planning Commission's comments on this.
So my question is related to that. If indeed the project is fully developed, as it will be by 2027, and there is determined there's an additional need for parking, I read that it can be at the discretion of the developer, or it can be at the discretion of the township. Does one take precedence over the other?
So this is going to be as part of the MUPUD update, one of the things that's going to happen if this gets approved, staff will work with the developer to create functionally what is a development agreement for the site. It'll be an MUPUD agreement. One of those terms will be what is going to trigger installation of additional parking based off the drawing they provided to us, dated, and I can't remember the date, so I shouldn't have said that. But functionally what would happen is we'll work out what's going to trigger it, and I think my experience tells me, having done a couple of these, what's going to trigger it is you start to see people parking illegally. Mm-hmm. And once we start to see people parking illegally in the project or in the surrounding areas, then we would trigger it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Duchesne.
I have a question for the developer if they would come forward. It's really relevant to the comment we got at the during our public comments earlier today. We don't typically respond to them directly, but since this is a public hearing and this issue was raised, I'll raise it with you. 290 additional residential units. Is this just a guess on your part, or have you done some market studies to determine what the current need for additional housing in that region of the township, that Haslet, Four Corners of Haslet portion of our township? In other words, what I'm asking you is, what does your market analysis tell you about residential needs in that part of our township?
Okay. Mike Bosgraff, 873 South Shore Drive, Holland, Michigan. We have done a market study. The market study was done personally for us in relationship to Meridian Township, Haslet, and just like pretty much every county, every city, any part of the state, there's need for additional housing units. We think that 294 units is low on the side of need for Haslet, so we're very, very comfortable that this project should go forward.
That's my question.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to item 12. Our action items. 12A is Ordinance 2022-10, decks and plan unit developments, final adoption. Mr. Schmidt.
I have nothing further to add to this other than at the direction of the Township Board, we did publish this notice of intent to adopt the ordinance after the Township Board's last meeting.
I would ask you to summarize again.
Absolutely.
What is actually covered in
this proposal it's a fairly minor change in the language with respect to plan unit developments to allow for changes in very specific circumstances to be done administratively instead of having to go through a major amendment to modify the amount of open space for a project. This covers condominiums. This covers plan unit developments that were developed as general condominiums, and specifically, we believe late 70s through mid 80s development, because at the time you were creating condominiums with the buildable area as simply the walls of the unit and not taking into account porches and patios. That practice eventually changed because people started to realize that was the problem. And so it's really a specific group of neighborhoods this applies to, and we have a couple of them waiting in the wings.
Okay.
Have a motion?
If you would like. Trustee Wilson.
I move to adopt the resolution approving for final adoption zoning amendment 2022-10 to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian in section 86-439 to amend the standards for enlarging decks in planned unit developments.
I'll support. Support by Trustee Wazinski. Comments?
Only that this is a logical extension of the way people live today. Rather than just staying within their four walls, they want their patios and their decks, and it is a pretty minor accommodation to be able to do that. So this will result in many fewer zoning board of appeals requests, correct?
That is one effect. The other effect, frankly, it just makes it easier for the homeowner.
Great.
Trustee Wendzinski?
I would only add that, Director Schmidt, thank you for looking at all our ordinances and bringing them up to date, given our, current situation and changes in time. So thank you.
Other board members? All right, the motion is to approve, and we need a roll call vote for this motion.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you.
You don't want to go too far, right?
You're not going to get rid of me that easy. Not getting rid of me that easily tonight.
Item 12B is ordinance 2022-11, municipal signage, and this is for introduction.
This is pursuant to the conversation that has happened at the Planning Commission and at the Township Board at their last meeting. This ordinance would amend a specific section of the sign ordinance to exempt municipal signage from the provisions therein. There's functionally two reasons for this. First and foremost, the majority of our signage relays a much different message than a different type of message than the traditional advertising sign. It would have, having a change of message sign out here would have been helpful during the water issue. In fact, that would have been a perfect example. And so we're really talking about health, safety, special events, public welfare, things like that. Secondly, though, and perhaps the thing that's really triggering this is the vast majority of township properties are zoned residential, which has virtually no allowance for signage. And so to do signage in the way that the Township Board has previously wanted to do with respect to our new brand logo, we do need to make this change in order to move forward. So what is in front of you this evening is a motion to approve for introduction that change.
All right. Treasurer DeShane.
I move to adopt a resolution approving for introduction zoning amendment 2022-11 to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian at section 86-696 to amend the standards for municipal signs.
Support.
Supported by by our clerk Guthrie. This does not require a roll call. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. And we then move to item 12C, Plan Unit Development number 22-014- at 3560 Hewlett Road, Jaguar Homes. And our responsibility tonight is to set a public hearing, set a date for a public hearing.
Yes, ma'am. All that is in front of you this evening is to set the public hearing. We would ask that that be set for August 4th. That's the first meeting that we can get the proper notice sent out pursuant to the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. We will do that notice after this meeting is set, and we'll bring this back at the next meeting for more thorough discussion once we have established the public hearing date.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
Move to set the public hearing for PUD 22-014, 3560 Hewlett Road, Jaguar Homes for the August 4th, 2022 Township Board meeting.
Trustee Sundlin?
Second.
Second to the motion. Further discussion, conversation? I have one question, Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't determine from the memo, has the Planning Commission already had its public hearing?
Yes, ma'am. So MUPUD and PUD ordinances both require a public hearing at both bodies.
Right.
The way they're written. They have, and we will provide all that information at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay. Other questions, comments? This also requires a voice vote. All in favor of the motion to set the public hearing for August 4, 2022 for PUD 22-014. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes, the motion passes unanimously. We move to 12D, Police Department Ordinance Amendments and Additions. We will hear from Chief Plaga. And
Mr. Harkness is here in
Mr.
case there's any
Harkness,
legal
yes.
questions. Madam Supervisor, board members, this introduction is to bring township ordinance in line with state statute. It allows us to prosecute through our local township attorney, Mr. Harkness, and it brings our existing ordinances in line with what state statutes read.
Okay.
Any questions?
Trustee Wilson?
May I make a motion?
Yes.
Move to approve the introduction of the amendments to Chapter 50 of the Code of Ordinance to amend trespass and disturbing the peace and add defrauding an innkeeper, breaking and entering, receiving and concealing stolen property, and inhalation or consumption of chemical agent.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. Comments? Questions? Trustee Wilson?
We have looked at this at our prior meeting, and I think the important thing here is not only to align us with state law and mirror state law, but also it provides an income stream if we do identify these as misdemeanors under our local jurisdiction. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, ma'am.
Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane?
I would guess that also allows for a more expedited prosecution of these items if the police department has recommended that.
That is true, sir. Working with Mr. Harkness is working with one attorney. When we go through the county attorney's office, there's several attorneys. We don't know exactly who or when our court will be, dates will be set. With Mr. Harkness, it moves through quite expeditiously.
Thank you.
No one else? Then this requires again a voice vote. The motion is to approve for introduction of these ordinance amendments and additions. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, opposed no. Then the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We move to item 12E. This is a resolution to authorize issuance of general obligation unlimited tax bonds. Talking money, yes. Mr. Officer.
Yes, good evening Supervisor Jackson and board members. So tonight before you is the second round of bonding under the August 2019 road millage. So we bonded the first time in this time 3 years ago in 2019. And so we are looking to go to the bond market in August, and in order to do so tonight, we need your approval for the resolution to sell these publicly traded bonds. What we are looking at doing is bonding for the next 3 years, so we're looking at bonding for 2023, 24, and 25. We've already bonded, of course, in 2019 for the first 3 years, and then in 2025, we will come back and bond for the final 4 years of the 10-year road millage program. Before you tonight is just slightly over 1/3 of the total bond. We are bonding for $12 million. That's to accelerate the program just slightly and get ahead of some of the compounding inflation that we're inevitably going to see. So we're now looking at going to a $4 million program up from 3.5 annually.
Okay.
So that is what's before you tonight. Again, these are all publicly traded bonds. It's a highly regulated marketplace. So we have worked with our bond counsel and our bond agent to work on this proposal. And And we've also looked at making sure that we can obligate the bonds within the first 6 months. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Board members, Mr. DeShane.
Assistant Manager Opsimer, is it not correct that we can only bond for expenditures we're going to incur in the next 3 years? And this is the reason we didn't bond for $8 million 3 years ago, or all $12 million when we first started the bonding process?
I'm trying to remember what constraints we had. We did have some constraints. Do you recall precisely what the constraints were that we were under? That was? Yep. So Manager Walsh is just stating that that's correct. I couldn't recall from the very beginning of this, but that is why we're going out in 3 separate instances.
It's too bad we can't go out tomorrow. Interest rates are on their way up right now. The CPI is going to be announced tomorrow, and the number probably won't be a good number by August. Who knows what the rate will be. On the plus side, when we turn around and reinvest these funds before we spend them, we'll also get higher rates of return, so it should match the cost of the bond as it did last time.
Yep, and as you know, we owe an arbitrage payment, meaning that the interest rate that we've earned on the money that's sat in there for the first 3 years has exceeded the interest rate payment. We do have a AA+ rating, and we have a meeting with S&P on Monday to pursue our credit rating. We do have to go through the credit rating process every time that we go to the bond market. So there is still a chance that we could upgrade that, but the bond on the first round was under 2%.
Yeah. And this allows for up to 6%. I think if we sold them tomorrow, we might get 2.5% or at most at 3%. So we have plenty of wiggle room there, even in this changing environment.
Yeah, we're going to be in the 2% range. That's just a cap. You have to impose a cap in the resolution, so that's a placeholder.
Good.
Trustee Wazinski.
I'll make a motion and have a comment. I'll move to approve the resolution to authorize issuance of general obligation unlimited tax bonds, Series 22, in the amount of $12 million.
Support.
Treasurer DeShane supports the motion. Any further comments or questions?
Quick question for Manager Opsimer. So you indicated we'll be increasing from 3.5 mil to 4 mil. Is that in preparation for increase in supplies and increase in contractor?
Yeah, it's basically to accelerate the program slightly, but we're not stealing, the final 3 years. So we're still going to have a steady flow of work, but we are bonding for $500,000 more per year for the 3 years, $1.5 million total more over the total 3 years. And that's to get ahead of the compounding inflation.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Lemaster, I believe we need a roll call vote in this instance.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Item 13A, under board discussion, is 1442 Haslet Road Boundary Correction Proposal. We will hear from Director Meisner.
Good evening, Supervisor Jackson and trustees. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Let's see here if I can. We were approached by a resident on Haslet Road regarding a small strip of land that is currently a land preserve. We purchased this property in 2010 from Merle Potter. We now call it the Lake Lansing South Land Preserve. And it is located up here on Carlton Road.
Excuse me.
You're not seeing it on your monitor?
Our monitor is black.
Oh, well, I have someone here that can take care of that. Thank you, Stephen.
Looks like it's off. Maybe it's shut off.
Well,
it was on.
The remaining diagram is in your packet. If that's helpful?
Yes. It's there.
Oh, it is?
Miracle worker.
Okay, great.
All right.
So, and I'm not sure if this happened when the whole subdivision up there was platted, but there's this small strip of land here that's 5.75 feet wide. And we have the homeowner here, the Hedemarks, who are here today. And we kind of struggle with this little strip of land. And they have submitted a proposal to trade the back portion of, a section of the back portion of their property into the land preserve. And then we could clean up this boundary here on the east side of their property. And we have written confirmation that they would pay for the new boundary surveys. We would need one for the land preserve as well as one for their own property, and amended property descriptions. And so this has gone to the Land Preservation Advisory Board, and they have approved it. There's no net loss to the land preserve. It's really just kind of cleaning up that whole boundary. And I believe part of their driveway was even on a section of that land back when the home was built. So it was just one of those quirky things that this is an opportunity for us to get this cleaned up. And so I wanted to bring this proposal to you today, and just to hear if there's any concerns or comments that we need to take into consideration moving forward. And then we will then look toward amending the boundary correction or the boundary surveys and the property descriptions moving forward and with this land trade.
Okay. Questions, comments?
It makes sense.
You know, there's not much to it, but I just wanted to make sure it came here first. It's already been to land preservation, and so we just wanted to make sure we had a clear path forward before, additional work takes place. And so this would be brought back to you at your next meeting for final approval.
That was my question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
No concerns? All right. We'll look forward to that. Thank you very much, Director Mason. Item 13B, Ordinance 2022-08, Traffic Impact Study Standards. Mr. Schmidt is back.
Like a bad penny. So this actually directly came out of the MUPUD ordinance update that you guys approved last year. Senior Planner Shorkey was relatively new to staff when that happened, and so he was starting to absorb things, and he looked at that ordinance and he looked at the rest of our ordinance, and he realized the rest of our ordinance was now in conflict with the MUPUD ordinance. And so I asked him to write it up real quick and let's take it to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission actually had some really good input on this one, and we took a step back originally and reworked how we were looking at it to try and make it function a little better. But what you have in front of you this evening would consolidate the standards for traffic impact studies, and so there'd be one place to look and there'd be one set of standards, as opposed to how our ordinance is set up that is somewhat haphazard throughout the ordinance. The Planning Commission did review this multiple times, and they actually asked the Transportation Commission to also weigh in. Transportation Commission was ultimately able to look at it at their June meeting and appreciated the opportunity to provide input and did support it as well. So this does have the support of 2 of our boards and commissions. If the board has no major concerns, we will bring this back for formal introduction at the next meeting.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Trustee Wazinski.
A couple questions for Director Schmidt, and I apologize because I'm just catching up on this.
No apology needed.
I'm looking at Section 3, subsection A, and it says here, and this is in the marked up version, I could tell you what page, maybe, not really.
Okay, Section 3, sub A, okay.
So it says here, it would be expected to generate between 50 and 249 directional trips during peak hour traffic, as opposed to 50 and 99. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that impacts us?
So the 50 to 99 was the previous standard, and so when the MUPUD ordinance came forward, this was a discussion at that point of 99 is not a lot. So functionally, every single project, no matter the scale, was triggering this. This was, and I would also I'm remiss if I don't reiterate, we don't control a road right away, so even if we have a traffic study that makes a recommendation, we actually can't enforce it unless the road department agrees with us. So it's actually more important that they are following the road department standards in this regard. And so what this does is it provides a little more flexibility for that bottom end. So you still would have to provide us with assessment if you're under 250, but that is more of an informational piece. That's a rough comparison of before and after. Whereas once you get over 250, that's when you have to do the real work of going into a full-blown study.
Okay. And similarly, in Section 3, subsection B, we increased phase of development, which would generate 250 more directional trips during peak hour, or over 750 trips on an average day, as opposed to 100. Very similar reason?
Same thing. It's to be consistent with the 50 to 249 in the previous section.
All my questions, Supervisor?
I beg your pardon?
That's all my questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there others? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Director Schmidt, I wondered if you could provide us with a brief summary that the planning for the Planning Commission's insight that you referenced here in the memo on some of the aspects of the original proposal. If you could just give us a brief overview of that, and for anyone at home who hasn't read the packet thoroughly.
Yeah, this is one of those times where it's good to have lay people looking at things that aren't in our field all the time, because something that Senior Planner Shorkey and I, or Assistant Planner Chapman, write, which makes perfect sense to us, may not make sense to the average person. And so the Planning Commission actually honed in on a couple of things. One, they, to Trustee Wazinski's question, they actually caught that typo in the numbers and got us to clarify that we had an inconsistency between our numbers, because initially we hadn't changed both sets, and so we had changed one and we created an overlap accidentally. Secondly, they had a lot of conversation about Section 3, Paragraph 1, or Paragraph A and Paragraph B, to provide specific standards for what we are expecting. So a certified traffic engineer instead of, so the current ordinance says qualified, but who determines qualifications? So they wanted us to be more specific. They wanted us to be clear as to how this is being designed. So the most current edition of the handbook, which is, we know that, but it's good to put it out there that is the standard. So they brought a level of layman to this that's really helpful for us to get out and make these ordinances more user-friendly.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
So basically, you're saying that anything up to a project that's expected to generate less than 250 car trips per day could have a traffic assessment by a non-professional, correct?
It's still going to be a certified traffic engineer, but the assessment is just a lower level of review.
Got it.
They don't have to get into turning movements and projected endpoints and starting points of traffic and where they're coming from. It's more, what is the general expectation of how much a use would create versus how much a existing would create.
And over 250, you have to go the full bore traffic.
Impact study. That's when you're getting into
right.
What impacts are you having on the surrounding intersections? What impacts are you having on the existing light timing and turning movements and things of that nature?
Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Approximately, what is the difference in cost between these two studies, the full bore study and a general assessment?
It's a substantial amount of money. It's well into four figures, if not five in some cases.
Okay.
I would also say the bigger thing is time. A traffic impact study is generally for larger projects, and it's going to take a lot of time, especially if you have to get new trip counts generated, because all you can do is put the counters out and wait at that point. So it is a time and money. It's really going to be bigger projects that trigger it.
Yep. And as this board wants to see the smaller scale development in the township to fill in some of our vacant areas rather than expansion infill, this could be less of a barrier for some of those smaller projects.
they can deploy those resources more effectively elsewhere.
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, if I remember traffic studies, kind of the bottom line is, has to do with an assessment of the level of service for an intersection and the tools available in the intersection. Can you get, I guess, real data to make those kind of changes and distinctions from both an assessment and a survey?
You would not get the data from an assessment, but typically an assessment's not going to be enough to trigger something from a level of service C to a D, because it's not a big enough project.
Okay.
But once you get into a full-blown TIS, absolutely there would be data there to show us, okay, this is creating enough traffic that the intersection of Park Lake and Grand River turning left on a Monday at 8 a.m. is dropping to a level of service F. Okay. And what, if anything, can we do about that? In a lot of cases, it's a 15-minute window and there's nothing you can do about it. But I've certainly had studies in the past for projects that show we have a multi-hour problem, so we need to, what is the impact to this intersection? What do we do to it? And so that's the kind of thing that here we'd work with the Ingham County Road Department to determine, okay, let's plan for this now while we're early on in the process. What do we need to do to address these concerns, which I know you're going to have when it gets to you.
Okay. Other questions? So what you need from us at this point is a kind of consensus that we would be prepared to, the next step is introduce for adoption?
Yes, ma'am. There's no formal action needed, but unless there's a major concern.
We don't need a vote right now.
No, we do. There's a motion to adopt the resolution.
Is there? I'm sorry. I missed it.
Kind of at the bottom. It's on...
But sometimes we see the motion, even though it's only up for discussion now, the motion will be likely taken up at our next meeting.
Right.
When we take an action item.
Okay, correct.
All right. You satisfied with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We move now to, with Mr. Schmidt, of course, 13C. And this is a similar ordinance 2022-12, Refuge Storage Container Regulations.
So this addresses an issue that you can see out and about if you look. These are the kind of things that kind of blend into the background unless you're looking for them. And our planning commission chair actually during the discussion of this made the comment, yeah, there's 3 of those at the end of my street that have been there for 4 or 5 years. And it took me a while to find them because they kind of blend into the background. So historically, there's really no good language in our ordinance to address temporary dumpsters for construction projects or pods, which have been increasingly popular over the past 10 years as a way to move. So if you're not aware, temporary dumpster generally is roll off. It's going to get dropped off, usually at a construction site, and usually people tend not to want to put them in their driveways because they get heavy very quick and they don't want to destroy your driveway. So they tend to be placed in yards, whereas pods, by their nature, are because they're framed, they need to be on solid ground. And so what happens is they get dropped in a driveway or a parking lot and they occasionally linger. As we've found. And so what this does is it provides basic guidelines for both of them. There's nothing outrageous in here. It's really just to tell us you're doing it, and here's where to do it. If it's a construction site, you can put it in the yard if you need to. Otherwise, we want it on a driveway. It'll also then help churn these a little more so they don't just become part of the background. Planning Commission reviewed this. Again, had some good commentary for us because originally we did not have 2 separate items in here. This was originally one item. In the Planning Commission's discussion, they thought that pods by their nature being sort of a framed thing should be treated differently than a roll-off that can just be tossed in a yard on a construction site if it needed to be. So we reworked this ordinance and brought it back to them, and they did recommend approval of this as well. So here this evening to have this discussion, we will bring it back for introduction if there are no major concerns at the next meeting.
Trustee, Treasurer DeShane.
I'm on page 282 of the packet. By the way, Director Schmidt, if we're not paying you by the agenda item, we should be, okay? Or at least structure our bonus structure that way, because you've been before this board a lot tonight, and the previous meeting, and the meeting before that, and the meeting before that. Anyway, I don't see the draft ordinance attachment 2 and 3 in my packet. If you have it on your computer, if you could display that, it might be helpful. Either the red line or the clean version of that ordinance. Do you see it in yours?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I pulled mine off the meeting, the township webpage, and maybe that was an earlier version of the packet.
So I think one of the issues we might be running into here, and I'm going to have to think about how best to do this. I think part of the confusion is sometimes because we're providing you guys with the Planning Commission memos too. They look just like my memo, except for the upper right-hand corner is the only real difference in some cases. It is in the packet. I actually pulled this just at 5:30 when I got back from the effort today. So I'm happy to get a copy of it to you tomorrow, Mr. Treasurer.
Okay. And the Planning Commission did recommend moving this forward to the full township board.
They did. After we worked through their concerns, they were happy with it.
The question I would have, that I've not seen the ordinance, is what is the time limits that we're proposing for these pods to be allowed in driveways?
So generally, whether it's a pod or a dumpster, if you have an active building permit, you're okay. And that's the important thing to note, is as long as you're using it, you can keep it. If it is not, if there's not an active building permit, it's 30 days.
Okay.
Trustee Witzinski.
To that same note, how did you choose 30 days, Mr. Schmidt?
So Senior Planner Shorkey did a review of surrounding ordinances to try and come up with what is a generally accepted number. Some were a little higher, some were pretty tight actually. I think we found a 10-day. 30 days seems like a reasonable amount. Largely, we started thinking about it as if I was moving, probably going to provide 30 days notice to my landlord if I'm moving out, or closing within 30 days. So we thought that was a good number to be flexible but still have a deadline.
In my experience with roll-offs, if you leave them out more than a few days, you're going to get everybody's garbage. But
and you're paying by the day at that point. So
that's just my experience.
Roll-offs are going to be the problem.
I have two other just comments. One of them is section 1, where it says, as known as pods, a transportable container or portable structure or other unit designed and used primarily for storage. I don't know if you want to add in there temporary storage. Just a comment. And then section 2A, the is just misspelled. Yes.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Thank you.
Easy peasy.
You stare at it enough times, you don't notice.
That's all my comments, Supervisor.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
So I have a question. Often people get a pod to store their furnishings while they're doing their remodel. So is there flexibility if that's the circumstance, and you may have a dumpster there, whatever it is, there on site, as well as your pod storage? As long as there's a building permit, would a pod be allowed to stay there?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as you have an active building permit, you're okay.
Great.
Treasurer DeShane.
So the 31st day with this proposed ordinance, what would, if the neighbor were to call and say it's been 31 days, what would your department then do?
So first step would likely be that we would double check that there's not an active building permit. We'd probably do that over the phone, frankly. After that, we would probably send Code Enforcement Officer Fenner out to just make contact and see what's going on. We'll try to be flexible with them, but ultimately if it's become a problem, then we'll tell them they need to remove it and take it off the site, and then ask to have an additional one, because you're allowed 2 a year. So if they needed to ask for a second one, they could, but it needs to leave the site to reset the clock.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So what are you calling the non-pod?
Under the ordinance, it's a temporary container unit.
But you called it a...
Yeah, I call it a roll-off because
roll-off.
it's on the back of a truck and they tilt the truck up and it rolls off.
Since the time I started reading this, I came up with this question. Why would not my trash cart and my recycling cart fit into that second category?
So specifically, the language we included about building materials, because that cart is not designed for disposing of building materials.
But it does hold household goods.
It does.
Personal items and other materials.
It does. And it is difficult sometimes to try and define things as clearly as possible.
Right.
But that's why we included the language about building materials, to differentiate it from the average 96 gallon.
Okay. A year or two ago, we tried to regulate the placement, the length of time that trash cans and recycling carts were left on the street.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that still in effect?
My understanding is that is not. That did not. That was not adopted.
It was not adopted. Oh, okay. So a reasonable person would not read what you have here and include those kinds of containers and these kinds of standards and restrictions.
No. A reasonable person should not make that
Careful.
inference.
Okay.
In terms of our enforcement, we would not enforce what you're referring to under this ordinance.
Okay. Okay. I'll go with that. When you talk about, in the case of the roll-off in a building situation, and you limit it to 2 on a site. Any site? I mean, if it's a big commercial site, commercial construction site, they're limited to 2?
They would be, and I would not expect them to have more than that, because usually that kind of stuff rotates pretty regularly.
Okay, okay.
So you don't get illegal dumping and the neighbors don't start tossing stuff in.
Okay, great. That's all I was concerned about. Further questions, comments? Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Where do you, if you live in a condo unit, for instance, and there's not a yard to put this on, is this just your team's going to go out there and assess the situation and see what's permitted?
Yeah, we're going to have to take a look. If there's a condominium situation where it's really just driveway or bust, we're going to have to take a look at it. We're not trying to prohibit people from doing this. We're just trying to put some guardrails in place to stay within this. Typically what I found in condominium associations, though, is they're a little more strict than we are usually, and so they're going to largely dictate where this would go in that scenario. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, we would agree with the condo association. We're not out to make waves, so we'd work with them.
So if someone is moving and they need a pod, let's say they're moving all of their stuff out of their place and they need a pod to put it all in, they need permission from the planning department to do that?
We're just asking them to give us a heads up that they're going to drop one. There's no permit, there's no fee, there's just a, hey, I need a pod. So that we can then say, when we get a complaint, nope, it's only been there for 10 days. They have 21 more days under the ordinance before, or 20 days under the ordinance before we'd have to remove it.
So if people don't know about this and they do this and someone notifies you, you go out there and you inform them, you don't fine them, you inform them and then tell them how to comply or how many days they have left to have this there.
Purely education. This is not intended to be a punitive ordinance at all.
Okay.
Are we ready? In 2 weeks?
We will bring it back for introduction.
Next meeting? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And item 13D, prospective resolution to the legislature and governor regarding local control under the Michigan Fireworks Safety Act. Mr. Officer.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson and board members. This was actually an agenda item initiated by Supervisor Jackson and Treasurer DeShane, so I don't know if you guys wanted to say anything before I just kind of go through the history of the public acts and what's occurred here.
Mr. DeShane.
Just quickly, we got many calls and emails, I shouldn't say many, a few calls and emails after the 4th, around the 4th, asking us why we were so permissive in allowing fireworks in the township. And so we then turned that question over to staff regarding our ordinance to get a clarification on that, and also then staff put out an inquiry to the police and fire chief about the number of calls we've gotten on this, and we got actually more data than we asked. We actually got not just this year's data, but past year's data as well. But this was really citizen initiated because of calls that we got following the 4th of July holiday.
So, and just a little bit more context on the citizen complaints we had. We had one from a resident who thought that we had our fireworks display on the 4th of July on the date of. So obviously they were hearing consumer-grade fireworks going off in their surrounding area, and they're thinking big municipal show, right? And so that was a point of confusion. And then the other one, you know, there is some degree of neighborly tension involved there. Certainly, I still owe the resident one more follow-up, and Director Schmidt was kind enough when I was out of the office on Friday to stop by and just get some pictures of the site conditions. But some dispensed fireworks were put out at the roadside. There was some small flames coming from them. They did catch on fire to a small extent. The fire department came out and they did hose them down. We do encourage our residents to saturate their fireworks after using them. But there's certainly some conflict between the two neighbors that extends beyond this issue in particular. But relatively a quiet year. If my memory serves me, we've received a lot more than one complaint about fireworks, seeing as though the one complaint was a resident a little bit confused as to when the township firework display was used.
Oh, yeah. I would just add that once we, particularly Treasurer DeShane and I, got more information about fireworks and firework regulation in the township, we thought that this was the perfect time to talk about it as a group and review what kinds of options were available to us in terms of mitigating the complaints that we were getting. And so what we found, as Mr. Opsima will tell us, is that there's really nothing we can do at this point, and there's only one way to change, or to at least have some impact on that fact.
Yep. And
so now you may review what we've all learned in the process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Supervisor Jackson. I'll walk through the history and kind of what I would say the board's options are, and then look for your direction, and we can bring a resolution back. So prior to a public act that was adopted in 2011, took effect in 2012, commercial grade fireworks were by and large prohibited in Michigan. So the sale and the possession of them, all airborne fireworks and also some other fireworks, commercial grade fireworks, were banned. Then with the passage of that bill in 2011, taking effect in 2012, now airborne fireworks are legal in Michigan. So residents are no longer going to the Ohio-Indiana border to purchase their fireworks, and they're legal to possess and discharge, so we have a lot more residents partaking in the firework industry. Initially, when the Public Act was first passed, there was 30 days that were codified in the Act in which it was legal to discharge fireworks. Then, over 6.5, 7 years, residents weighed in, and I can speak from personal knowledge, Having seen many of the complaints, residents contacted their state lawmakers fervently, and in 2018, the law was amended and reduced down to 12 or 13 days, depending on which day of the week the 4th of July falls on. So they did greatly reduce it, but there still isn't really a whole lot of local control. The Township Board did act based on that 2018 amendment to state law and did restrict it down to 12 to 13 days, depending on which day of the week the 4th of July falls on. So we do have the most restrictive ordinance. We have the most, we levy and impose the maximum fine that we can possibly impose. Enforcement is obviously a problem. We have to catch people discharging the fireworks on a date and or a time when they are not permitted to do so, which is terribly difficult to do. The number one enforcement mechanism of the pre-2012 or pre-2011 Public Act passing was that you had to travel many miles unless you live close to the border to get fireworks, right? So that was the number one enforcement mechanism. And then number two was the fact that just simply being in possession of them. So if you discharged some and still had some on your possession when the first responders arrived, if you were called in, they could see that you had fireworks, and they might be able to confiscate those under the old law. So obviously that was a much more enforceable law. It's difficult to conceive that that's going to just go away now that we have an established industry. So your options really are to ask the legislature to restore the law to that pre-2011 Public Act that passed, or to give local units greater local control. And then the question that the board also needs to ask is how specific would it like to be versus how general would it like to be. The more general you are, the more likely your thoughts and input might mirror what MML, MTA, MAC are saying on this issue, or other local units are saying. The more specific you are, the more specific you might be giving some lawmakers an idea that they actually want to pursue, right? So there's pros and cons to being fairly vague and ambiguous and simply asking for more local control, and there's some pros and cons to being specific in how much local control you want, or what you want the legislature to do with the Public Act, even if it were to be a repeal. So there's lots of pros and cons, but what really tipped the scales in 2018 was just the extent to which lawmakers were inundated with public input. And I think they saw that it was organic. You get a ton of web forms where someone fills out a web form and it automatically sends an email on your behalf, and you don't even really know what the email said. Most people that sent it don't. Then they get a reply back and they're like, oh, well, that's what, this group had me email to my lawmaker. So, but in this case, I think the lawmakers could easily see that it was pretty organic input that they were getting from the community. The same input that you received the other week from one of our residents.
Thank you. Any comments? Trustee Wilson.
Just trying to understand why you would want a prospective resolution on this to the legislature. I think there's some merit to combining with MML or MTA if this is a direction that other townships want to go in. But to my knowledge, we had 2 complaints. Is that accurate?
Unless, well, law enforcement and first responders might have had other complaints that I'm not aware of. The board email had 2 complaints, correct?
I'm not sure what we can accomplish with this proposed resolution, so I'd like to hear your thinking on it.
Treasurer DeShane.
Well, I think the first thing that we want to assert with this would be a request for local control, so that we could set our own ordinance. And this is one of other things this legislature has done, is to take away local control. In fact, one of the ones that's pressing on this area is the whole question of Airbnb. It's a separate issue, but local control is the essence of it. If you look at the police responses, they had 57 police responses to fireworks complaints in 2020, 23 in 2021, 28 last year, 28 so far this year. this is causing a lot of police time to be out there with a issue that our hands are tied to do much about. And as Dan has pointed out, unless we catch someone in the act of doing it, there's not much we can do about it. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and I heard a lot of fireworks this year. I don't know other people's experiences. The thing about these fireworks is they are such that it doesn't take a lot of people shooting off fireworks outside these hours for it to become an issue for a whole neighborhood or a whole section of the township. But I was surprised by the high number of police responses we've had the past 3 years to this issue. And nothing else, I would like to see us request more general issue of bring back local control for this so that we can, based on our experience, set our own rules rather than having these 10 or 11 days set for us by the legislature. That's my intent with this resolution.
So we'd be one township requesting this out of all the many townships across the state of Michigan. Do you think the legislature would even accept this information? I'm just trying to think how impactful it would be if we had such a resolution.
Well, as Dan pointed out, it was organic response to the initial law that kind of peaked in 2018 that got them to change the law then. So I'm not saying we're going to be able to do this by ourselves, but as a township aware of this issue, by speaking up, perhaps there'll be other townships or cities that would also speak up, and that will create an organic effort for the legislature to give us some local control over this, or in some ways do more than we're doing now, which is basically just shrug our shoulders and say, we have no control over this, it's all set by state law. So no, we won't change it all by ourselves, but we are one of 1,200 townships in the state of Michigan that, in speaking out, may impact it in the aggregate, if not individually.
Would it not be better taken up at the Michigan Townships Association? It would seem to me it'd have more impact if indeed there were other communities feeling that way for MTA to be doing that kind of lobbying effort. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
That is a great idea. We should find out what MTA and MML have done on this issue. Maybe that would be the next step.
I think we should. I think that would be far more impactful than us just putting out a resolution that we know is one single resolution before a body, before the legislature, when they have many, many other things that are important to them.
I don't disagree with you on that. We should reach out to them and find out what MML and MTA, we're members of both, we pay dues to both, and in essence, they are our lobbyists.
They're lobbying. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Other comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So if I'm reading this memo correctly, the township, residents can legally use fireworks 12 to 13 days in the town, and that these days must be allowed that are listed here.
Yes.
And these bullet points.
Correct. State law states specifically and explicitly that these dates, locals have to allow it on these dates. But they could expand it and they could allow other dates
12 to 13.
as well.
So this is 12 to 13 in Meridian Township.
Yep, it's a floor. So the state law is saying this is the floor. This is how much local control you're allowed to impose. But you could expand. You have local control to allow firework discharge on other days, but not restrict it.
So this is a minimum, and this is what the township has, and we could have more days than this if we wanted to.
Yes.
We can include holidays, we could, other holidays that are celebrated. We could include Juneteenth if we wanted to. It doesn't, this is what the current township restriction is.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And this was adopted in April of 2019. The amendment passed in the fall of 2018. So, and I believe that was Director Kieselbach and Chief Hamill. Chief was here at that time. He had just started with the township, and that was one of the first things he worked on was this ordinance change.
Can I ask a question of the police chief?
Certainly.
Yes, I will let you do that.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. When I hear fireworks go off in my neighborhood, I'm looking for where they are. And I know that the sound is faster than the light that I'm seeing, or vice versa.
Vice versa.
Yeah, so it's hard to locate. How hard is it when somebody complains about fireworks going off for your officers to actually respond and go locate these? I mean, I get like Lake Lansing, okay, that's pretty easy, things are going off there, but how hard is it when somebody, hi, I live on Dustin Road and I hear stuff and I don't think it's right, can you come check it out?
Well, it depends on the volume of fireworks, right? Typically, people don't let off one bottle rocket or one mortar. They let off several. So you hear a few, you call, and we kind of get in the area and we can pinpoint them. But sometimes it becomes difficult. You know, between the time you call and the time we get there, they may be done. Correct, and that's part of the difficulty with enforcement.
So, regardless of if we have 20 days or 10 days or 5 days, it's my assumption, or what I'm hearing, is that it's pretty difficult to enforce no matter how many days it is.
It can be very difficult. We do have firework complaints that are on off holiday dates, and on occasion we do catch people and issue citations, but that's a rarity, to be honest. Like Mr. Opsimer said, possession of fireworks is legal now, and that used to be the number one. When we had the 4th of July fireworks, people would be lighting fireworks off in the parking lots, and we could find them and confiscate them and issue citations at that time. But I mean, it becomes very difficult.
So with these dates that the township has set in place, do you see, I understand you probably see more calls surrounding these dates, but do you see a lot of calls when it gets further away, like 5 days away from July 4th or 10 days, or does it predominantly surround the July 4th holiday, give or take a couple days?
It surrounds most of the major holidays that are listed. There are occasions we've had complaints, people celebrating birthdays or other significant events in their culture where they light up a series of fireworks, and we may get a complaint and address those, but it is predominantly around the holidays. Labor Day, 4th of July, not so much Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Other comments? I would just note that not only the number of days in which firing is appropriate or is allowable, but there's also the time of day. You could, on those allowable days, it's 11 a.m. to 11:45 or something like that. That would be something I would like to control a little tighter if I could. The other, there was another point, but I think I've forgotten what it was. But anyway, I agree that if you're at all interested in having a say about how fireworks are executed in the township, then one of the first things you do is look to MML and MTA to see if they don't already have that on their agenda of issues. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a smart move. But I agree with Treasurer DeShane that the issue of the ability of a local community to manage their environment and in the vein of the community's taste and tolerance should not be infringed by the legislature. So at this point, I am in support of pursuing the possibility of at least letting our representatives in the legislature know that this is something that's important to us, and to investigate, as they probably would do at that time, whether or not those other organizations that lobby for us would also be interested in joining that kind of effort. At this point, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of enthusiasm for getting to work on this anytime soon. Treasurer DeShane.
I noticed Dan was jotting down Judy Allen's name on his sheet, and Judy Allen is the lobbyist for the MTA. Maybe we can invite her to attend a meeting, or at least address us in the form of a letter on this issue, see if there's other issues. While she's here, she could talk about other local control issues as well. It'd be very informative for the board. I happen to have missed the last two MTA conferences because they conflicted with the treasurer's meetings, and it'd be great to get an update from Judy Allen on local issues, including this one. Would that be agreeable to the board to invite Ms. Allen to come and speak before the board about this and other local control issues? She may even be a local, because she works at the Capitol, I'm guessing she doesn't live too far from here.
She may not live in the Lansing region if my memory serves me. But I can give Judy a call and certainly get an update from her at the very least and invite her. The challenge, and Trustee Wilson and I were talking about this when she called me about this issue. One of the challenges in the legislative environment for MML and MTA and MAC, the Michigan Association of Counties, is that, there's bills, the Airbnb stuff, right? Just local statewide preemption, and then there's a growing movement of introducing bills that would eliminate huge portions or all personal property tax. And so there's these other issues that get put on the table by lawmakers, and it just eats away at the time that these three entities have to lobby, and so they don't get the opportunity to dig in on some of these other issues that they certainly would work on more, but they're busy, no pun intended, but putting out fires on issues that are of greater consequence to local units, so it's a challenge. They don't get kind of the privilege to work on some of these issues. But, just some other ideas for the board to consider. I'll call and get an update from MTA and MML, and I can, at the very least, give the board an update in writing on that. But, you might consider going to some of the other local units in the region, the county and other cities and villages and townships in the region, and seeing if other people wanted to speak up on this issue and do something together, whether it's, it could just be a joint letter. So going to the other elected bodies of within the region and building a little bit more support. But yeah, it's an uphill battle to get the legislature's attention on this issue. But it has been done before. So there's plenty of things that haven't ever been done before in the legislative realm. So.
Okay. Thank you. Clerk Guthrie.
I'm sorry, I have one final comment about this. The issue I have is I agree with the time and shortening that time during that specific day. The issue I have is the fact that we have a large multicultural community, and I have often heard fireworks going off at my neighbors' homes where they're celebrating New Year's for their particular culture. And so I personally, my issue is that they're not included in these days of celebration where fireworks are allowed to go off. That's my issue with this, is that it's too restrictive. I would think that this township would want to include our Asian community, our Indian community, our African American community. So I have the opposite issue of appealing to this. I'm not really sure what the exact language of the resolution is, but when I look at these restrictive days, and I know my personal experience with my neighbors who live next door to me, I appreciate going out and celebrating with them. and seeing them celebrate their traditions and embracing that rather than being restrictive like the current township language is. And I understand the police probably get several calls because there is a lack of understanding of what those cultural traditions are. And so I would rather embrace those cultural traditions and expand this. That's the issue I have as a board member with what is presented to us tonight.
Mm-hmm. So maybe what we should do is kind of table this for a while till we do more research. And whenever you get more information, we hope you'll share it with us.
Absolutely, and we can at least take what we've compiled, the list of dates where it's permitted and the times, and try to distill that down in something that we can put out in a Meridian Happenings newsletter, so we can get this information out and we can repurpose it. You know, Andrea and Sam and the communications department is continuously repurposing and pushing content back out, you know, cyclically, so it's not like it just goes out one time and gets lost.
Okay.
So this is probably something that we can do a little bit better effort on. But just one note for the board, out of the 28 instances this year, 18 of those 28 police responses did occur on a date when it wasn't permitted to blow off fireworks. So just looking at those dates and circling them.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Item 14 on our agenda is comments from the public. Are there, I don't see members of the public left in the room. And so I will go on to item 15. Are there other matters and board member comments at this time? Then item 16 is a closed session. We need a motion. Mr. DeShane.
I move to go into closed session to discuss the proposed settlement agreement regarding the Winslow Mobile Home Park.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. I need a roll call vote.
Trustee Sumlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
It does get cold in here, doesn't it?